It all started with garlic. Not a meth lab, not a body buried under the petunias, but the heavenly scent of garlic, butter, and rosemary roasting on a chicken. A perfectly innocent, utterly delicious Sunday afternoon chicken. Little did I know, that bird was about to become the feathered harbinger of my suburban downfall, and then my smoke-fueled resurrection. I'm Leo, 32, graphic designer, perpetually clad in ironic band t-shirts, and, until recently, a contented resident of the most aggressively beige suburb in America. My greatest vices were an overly ambitious vinyl collection, a spice rack that could shame a five-star restaurant, and a penchant for turning a simple Tuesday night dinner into a culinary event. My life was a predictable, pleasant rhythm of client calls, design mock-ups, and the satisfying sizzle of something delicious hitting a hot pan. I liked my quiet, I liked my routine, and I really liked my food. This particular Sunday, the air in my kitchen was thick with promise. I was attempting a spatch-cocked chicken, basted in a garlic herb butter, destined for crispy skin and succulent meat. The aroma, a warm, savory hug, was what I considered a public service. Who wouldn't want a free whiff of that? Apparently, Brenda, 2 houses down, with the Live, Laugh, Love sign on her porch and a haircut so severe it looked like it was chiseled from granite. The first knock was polite, optimistic even. I figured it was a package delivery or maybe the kid down the street hawking overpriced lemonade. I wiped my hands on a tea towel, humming along to some obscure indie rock, and opened the door. There she stood, a specter of suburban disapproval, clutching a pristine white tissue to her nose as if my house was actively exhaling toxic fumes. Her eyes, narrowed slits, scanned past me and seemed to penetrate directly into my kitchen. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice strained, like someone forcing a smile while enduring a root canal. "I'm Brenda, from 2 houses down." "Leo," I replied, extending a hand she conspicuously ignored. "Can I help you?" "Well, yes, Leo, you can," she began, the words clipped and precise. "I'm calling about the odors." Odors, not smell. Odors. It immediately put me on the defensive. Odors? Yes, persistent and rather pungent. It's been quite strong for the last hour, emanating from your property. She gestured vaguely in the direction of my open kitchen window, as if pinpointing the source of a biohazard. I blinked. "I'm roasting a chicken," I explained, trying to sound as unthreatening as possible. "With garlic and rosemary." Her nose crinkled further. "Yes, well, it's quite strong. We, in the community, pride ourselves on maintaining a certain atmospheric neutrality. These robust culinary expressions, while I'm sure they're delightful to you, can be rather disruptive. Atmospheric neutrality? I almost laughed. Was I supposed to be cooking tofu in a vacuum chamber? My mind raced, trying to translate her polite suburban speak. Was robust culinary expressions code for ethnic odors? No, surely not. This was 2023. This was the suburbs, not a forgotten episode of a 70s sitcom. "I'm sorry if it's bothering you," I managed, genuinely flustered. I was a man who preferred to avoid conflict, especially with someone who seemed to weaponize politeness. "I can close the window, I suppose." "That would be most appreciated," she said, her tone implying that I had just narrowly averted a major diplomatic incident. "We do have covenants, you know, about maintaining neighborhood harmony and property values." Property values. The ultimate suburban trump card. She gave a thin, triumphant smile, still clutching the tissue, and then, with a rustle of her sensible cardigan, she was gone, leaving behind a faint, lingering scent of potpourri and passive aggression. I closed the window, feeling a bizarre mix of annoyance and guilt. Had I really been that inconsiderate? I took a deep breath. The smell of garlic and rosemary, now trapped inside, was indeed potent. But it was good. This was the smell of home, of comfort, of Sunday, not a blight on the neighborhood. A few days later, the postman delivered not just junk mail and bills, but a crisp white envelope with the HOA logo emblazoned on it. I tore it open, a knot forming in my stomach. Subject: notice of violation, persistent and offensive odors. Dear resident, Mr. Leo Maxwell, it has come to our attention, through a formal complaint, that your property at 123 Maple Drive has been the source of persistent and offensive odors emanating into the common areas and neighboring properties. This is in direct violation of Article 4, Section 3B of our Community Covenants, which states, "Residents shall not engage in any activity, nor permit any condition to exist on their property which emits noxious or offensive odors detectable beyond the property line, so as to create a nuisance or disturb the peaceful enjoyment of other residents' properties, or to negatively impact community aesthetics and property values." We understand that culinary activities are a part of daily life. However, the intensity and duration of the reported odors have exceeded reasonable limits. We kindly request that you take immediate steps to mitigate these emissions to ensure compliance with the community standards. Failure to address this violation within 7 days may result in further actions, including fines and enforcement through legal channels. Sincerely, the Maple Drive Homeowners Association Board. I reread the letter, then reread it again. Atmospheric neutrality had been codified. Offensive odors. Noxious. My garlic rosemary chicken. My perfectly innocent, delicious chicken was now legally noxious. My simmering annoyance began to boil. My suburban bubble, once so comforting, now felt like a cage. And Brenda, with her sensible cardigan and her live, laugh, love sign, had just declared war. A war, it seemed, against anything that dared to smell good. I clutched the letter, the paper crinkling in my hand. This wasn't just about a smell anymore. This was about my right to cook, to live, to fill my home with whatever damn aroma I pleased. And I knew, with a sudden chilling clarity, that this was far from over. The HOA letter sat on my counter, a stark white testament to Brenda's unwavering commitment to olfactory oppression. My initial fluster had hardened into a quiet, determined resolve. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature, but this felt like an attack on my very soul, or at least my taste buds. My first response was an attempt at diplomacy, a strategy I now realize was hopelessly naive. If my cooking was the problem, perhaps a peace offering, something universally adored and utterly inoffensive, would do the trick. I spent an entire Tuesday evening baking a batch of my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies, soft, chewy, with just the right amount of browned butter. Their scent, subtle and sweet, filled my kitchen. Surely no one could object to the smell of fresh-baked cookies. They were the edible equivalent of a white flag. Armed with a plate piled high, wrapped in cellophane and tied with a little ribbon, I walked the 2 houses down. Brenda's porch was immaculate, her live, laugh, love sign gleaming menacingly in the evening sun. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. She answered, her eyes widening slightly when she saw me, then narrowing as she registered the plate in my hands. It was the look of a hawk, spotting a particularly unappetizing mouse. "Leo," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Brenda," I replied, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to apologize again for the odors. I made these as a peace offering. My grandmother's recipe. No garlic, I promise." I tried to inject some humor into it, but it landed with the thud of a stale biscuit. She looked at the cookies as if they were a biological weapon. "Oh, thank you, but no. I'm gluten-free, dairy-free, and I'm watching my carb intake. And frankly, Leo, the issue isn't what you're cooking, but the intensity of your cooking. It's not just the savory items. The lingering smell of baked goods, while perhaps less offensive, still pervades the neighborhood. We simply ask for moderation." Moderation. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled accusation that my very passion for food was an excess, a transgression. I wanted to ask if she lived on a diet of air and passive judgment. "I see," I said, the smile wilting on my face. "Well, I tried." "Yes, you did," she said, managing to turn "thank you" into a rebuke. "Now, if you'll excuse me." She closed the door gently but firmly, leaving me standing there, a plate of unwanted cookies in my hand, feeling utterly deflated. The cookies, it turned out, were delicious. A fact I discovered by eating half the plate myself while wallowing in self-pity. This was not going to be easy. Defiantly, a few days later, I decided to test the waters again, but on a smaller scale. No roasting, no baking, just a single, perfectly seared ribeye steak in my cast-iron pan. A quick, high-heat operation. Minimal lingering scent, I reasoned. The sizzle and the smell of a good steak are truly one of life's simple pleasures. I opened the window a crack, just to tempt fate. I was halfway through flipping the steak, the kitchen filled with the intoxicating aroma of caramelized meat, when the doorbell rang. Ding-dong. A single insistent ring. My heart sank. I paused, spatula in hand, a plume of steak-scented steam wafting around my head. It couldn't be, could it? I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Brenda. And this time she wasn't alone. She was holding her phone, angled slightly, as if recording. And next to her, on the sidewalk, was a man in a crisp white shirt holding a clipboard. He looked official. An HOA enforcer, perhaps. Or worse, a city inspector. I opened the door, a forced casualness in my voice. "Brenda, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Leo," she said, her voice dripping with triumphant accusation. "That's a smoke smell. I can see it wafting out your window. You're creating a fire hazard. And what's this?" She gestured dramatically at the faint wisp of steam escaping my barely open window. "Excessive emissions." The man with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Mr. Maxwell, I'm with the city's Public Nuisance Abatement Department. We received a complaint regarding excessive smoke and odors emanating from your property. Is there a fire?" "A fire?" I spluttered, incredulous. "No, I'm cooking a steak. One steak." Brenda stepped forward, practically vibrating with self-righteousness. "He's been doing this for weeks, filling the air with noxious fumes. It's a clear violation of city ordinances regarding smoke abatement and public health." I looked at the steak sizzling merrily in my pan, then back at Brenda's furious face, then at the clipboard-wielding official. This was insane. My simple desire to cook a decent meal had turned into a full-blown public nuisance investigation. I was being treated like I was operating a back-alley rendering plant, not searing a piece of prime beef. That night, utterly defeated, I ate a sadly microwaved lean cuisine. The steak, having endured 2 rounds of interrogation, tasted vaguely of shame. I slumped on my couch, endlessly scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself from the absurdity of my life. My culinary creativity was being choked, stifled by the iron fist of the HOA and the zealous nose of Brenda. Then, an algorithm-fueled miracle. A YouTube video popped up in my feed. Best of BBQ Brawl 2022 Grand Finale. I clicked, half-heartedly. The screen exploded with color, sound, and a glorious, billowing cloud of smoke. Massive, custom-built smokers, some the size of small cars, lined a vast field. Tatted-up pitmasters, looking like a cross between rock stars and lumberjacks, were lovingly tending huge cuts of meat. Brisket, ribs, pork shoulder, all glistening, all surrounded by an almost mystical haze. The crowd was enormous, cheering, laughing, and inhaling the smoke with undisguised delight. Judges, with serious expressions, savored each bite. They weren't complaining about the smell. They were celebrating it. They were worshiping it. My eyes widened. My brain, dulled by the lean cuisine and suburban despair, slowly started to whir. These people weren't just cooking. They were creating, performing, competing. And the central, undeniable, glorious byproduct of their art was smoke. Thick, delicious, unapologetic smoke. Smoke that traveled for miles. Smoke that got into your hair, your clothes, your soul. Smoke that was the very essence of their craft. An idea, beautiful and terrible, began to bloom in my mind. A seed of vengeance, watered by frustration and fertilized by the sheer, magnificent absurdity of it all. Brenda wanted atmospheric neutrality? Brenda wanted moderation? Fine. I would give her the exact opposite. I didn't just need to cook. I needed to cook on a scale so epic, so undeniably fragrant, so overwhelmingly smoky, that her complaints would become utterly ridiculous. My search history, which moments before had been a depressing parade of how to appease HOA and city smoke ordinances, rapidly transformed. Now it read, Industrial Offset Smoker for Sale, Reverse Flow Smoker Largest Capacity, and BBQ Competition Circuit Rules USA. The microwaved dinner suddenly tasted like victory. This wasn't just about delicious food anymore. This was war, and I, Leo Maxwell, mild-mannered graphic designer, was about to become the undisputed, smoke-wielding, brisket-burning champion of petty revenge. The next morning, propelled by an almost manic energy, I delved deep into the online world of industrial smokers. These weren't your backyard Weber kettles. These were beasts of steel, monuments to the art of slow-cooked meat. My initial searches had been a little ambitious. Some models looked like decommissioned train engines. While tempting, I needed something that could fit in my backyard without requiring a zoning variance for small industrial processing plant. I finally found a local company, Gus's Custom Smokers and Grills, nestled in a slightly grungier part of town. Their website proudly displayed photos of monstrous, custom-built units, each one a gleaming, black steel work of art. I called the number, my heart thumping with a mix of trepidation and gleeful anticipation. A gruff voice answered, "Gus's, what can I get for you?" "Hi," I began, trying to sound nonchalant, like someone who regularly bought industrial-grade cooking equipment. "My name's Leo Maxwell. I'm looking to acquire a smoker, a substantial one." There was a pause, a low rumbling sound that could have been a laugh or just Gus shifting his weight. "Substantial, huh? You looking for a little backyard offset for burgers and ribs, or you feeding an army?" "Neither, really," I replied. "I'm thinking bigger. I want something that says, I am the god of smoke, and this entire zip code is my temple. Something that doesn't just cook, but declares." Another, longer pause. This time I was pretty sure it was a chuckle. "Well, that's a new one. Most folks just want to make good brisket. You doing catering? Opening a restaurant?" "No," I admitted, a slight flush rising to my cheeks. "This is for personal use, strictly personal. It's more of a neighbor thing." The chuckle deepened into a full-blown, rumbling laugh. "A neighbor thing, huh? I like the sound of that. Tell me, is this neighbor thing more of a friendly wave, or more of a my smokestack is bigger than your sense of personal space kind of thing?" "Definitely the latter," I confirmed, feeling a surge of kinship with this man I'd never met. She reported the smell of my roasted chicken to the HOA, multiple times. Got me a violation letter. "A chicken?" Gus bellowed, his voice practically vibrating the phone. "A chicken? Lord help us. Son, you've come to the right place. I got just the thing for you. It's called the Apocalypse 2000 or reverse flow, 300-gallon capacity, insulated firebox, custom stack. Looks like a small submarine. Smokes like a forest fire. Built it for a guy who was going to open a food truck, but he got cold feet. She's been sitting here, waiting for her true calling." My eyes widened. The Apocalypse 2000. The name alone was music to my ears. It perfectly encapsulated the scale of my intended vengeance. How big is it?" "She's about 12 feet long, 5 feet wide, weighs about 1.5 tons, needs a dedicated pad, concrete, minimum 6 inches thick, and a crane to get her in your yard. But she'll smoke 20 briskets at once, easy. Or, 100 chickens, if that's your thing." He paused. "And the smell?" "Son, the smell will cling to curtains, permeate clothing, and possibly alter the molecular structure of nearby lawn gnomes." "I'll take it," I said, without even asking the price. This wasn't a purchase. It was an investment in pure, unadulterated, delicious spite. "Whoa there, cowboy," Gus interjected, clearly amused. "Let's talk numbers. This ain't cheap. You're looking at, well, let's just say it's more than a new car." My stomach did a flip, but the image of Brenda's face, contorted in outrage, solidified my resolve. "Doesn't matter. I need it. When can you install it?" Gus named a price that made my eyes water. But the vision of the Apocalypse 2000 belching glorious smoke over Brenda's pristine live laugh love sign was worth every penny. I swiped my credit card, a dizzying mix of fear and elation coursing through me. This was it, the point of no return. The day the Apocalypse 2000 arrived was, as Gus had promised, a neighborhood event. I'd warned him about the HOA, and he'd just chuckled. "Don't worry, son. We're fully licensed and insured. And we bring snacks." A massive flatbed truck, carrying what looked like a shiny black torpedo, rumbled down our quiet suburban street. Trailing behind it was a crane truck, its boom folded like a mechanical praying mantis. Neighbors, drawn out by the sheer spectacle, began to emerge from their homes, some openly staring, others peeking from behind curtains. Children pointed, dogs barked. Brenda was the first to make a full appearance, standing on her immaculate lawn, arms crossed, her expression a perfect mask of horrified indignation. She looked as though a small alien invasion force had landed in my backyard. Gus, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard and a mischievous twinkle in his eye, hopped out of the truck. He spotted Brenda immediately. "Ah, the target acquired, boys," he hollered to his crew, who were already setting up cones and unfurling the crane's massive supports. "Mr. Maxwell," Brenda's voice cut through the air, sharp and brittle. "What, precisely, is that monstrosity?" "This," I announced, puffing out my chest slightly, "is my new barbecue smoker, Brenda. It's called the Apocalypse 2000. Her jaw dropped, just a fraction. It was enough. The next few hours were a blur of coordinated chaos. The crane operator, a surprisingly gentle giant named Earl, expertly maneuvered the massive smoker over my fence and lowered it onto the specially poured concrete pad in my backyard. The ground vibrated. The air thrummed. Each clank and grind of the machinery felt like a tiny victory. Gus and his crew, a collection of equally jovial, heavily tattooed men, worked with practiced efficiency, bolting the stack into place, checking the firebox, explaining the various dampers and vents. They kept up a running commentary of jokes and good-natured ribbing. "You sure you don't want a turret on this thing, Leo?" one of them asked, wiping grease from his brow. Maybe a giant foghorn to announce turn-in times? Another chimed in. I just grinned, watching Brenda's increasingly apoplectic face. She paced her lawn, occasionally muttering into her phone, undoubtedly alerting the entire HOA board, possibly the FBI, about the sudden appearance of a small, smoke-generating battleship in my backyard. As the crew packed up, Gus clapped me on the shoulder. "All right, Leo, she's all yours. She's gonna be a learning curve, but she'll do you proud. And remember, the more smoke, the more flavor, and the more annoyance." He winked. "Good luck, kid, make some noise." I stood in my backyard, gazing at the gleaming black behemoth. The Apocalypse 2000. It dominated the space, a silent, imposing promise. My backyard, once a placid expanse of lawn, now felt like the launch pad for a delicious, smoke-filled revolution. Brenda had wanted atmospheric neutrality. I was about to give her atmospheric saturation, and I couldn't wait to fire her up. The Apocalypse 2000 sat in my backyard, a silent, steel monument to my burgeoning vendetta. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly baffling. Gus had given me a quick rundown, but the sheer number of levers, vents, and thermometers was daunting. I'd watched a dozen YouTube videos, consumed articles on fire management, and devoured forums on low and slow cooking. I felt like an aspiring rocket scientist, armed with a match and a bag of wood chips. My first mission? Pork butt. 3 massive ones, totaling about 20 pounds, rubbed down with a generic BBQ seasoning I'd bought in a moment of overwhelmed panic. The goal was to prove a point to Brenda. The goal was not to create good barbecue. Not yet. The goal was smoke. Lots and lots of smoke. I loaded the firebox with a mix of hickory and oak, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. I started the fire, watched the flames lick at the wood, and closed the door. The temperature gauge slowly began to climb. Within minutes, a thin wisp of smoke began to curl from the stack. I grinned. It was working. But then, the wisp turned into a plume. The plume turned into a column, and the column, thick and dark, mushroomed into a billowy, impenetrable cloud that engulfed my backyard, spilled over my fence, and began to drift majestically, inexorably, towards Brenda's pristine, live, laugh, love sanctuary. It wasn't the fragrant, delicious smell of good BBQ. It was the acrid, overwhelming stench of a tire fire mixed with a hint of burnt offerings to a very angry deity. My eyes watered. My throat tickled. I started coughing. My dog, Bartholomew, a fluffy golden retriever usually obsessed with my every move, had long since retreated indoors, burying himself under my bed with a look of profound betrayal. "Oops," I mumbled, trying to fan the air with a stray dish towel, which was about as effective as trying to move a hurricane with a feather. The smoke was so thick I could barely see my own hand. My neighbor's prize-winning rose bushes were shrouded in a gothic, smoky haze. I could only imagine what Brenda was experiencing. Probably a full-blown existential crisis about property values. Then, the inevitable. 2 sharp raps on my front door. Not Brenda's polite yet passive-aggressive knock, but the firm, authoritative knock of the law. I wiped my eyes, coughed a few more times, and cautiously approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw the unmistakable navy blue of a police uniform. And standing on my sidewalk, several yards back, her hands on her hips, was Brenda, pointing dramatically at my house. I opened the door, trying to look like a normal, law-abiding citizen who wasn't currently recreating a scene from Pompeii in his backyard. "Good afternoon, sir," said the first officer, a young, earnest man with a neat mustache. He looked vaguely uncomfortable, his eyes already darting towards the smoke cloud billowing over my roof. "We're Officers Miller and Davis. We've had a report." About the atmospheric conditions, I finished for him, resigning myself to my fate. Officer Davis, a taller, more stoic woman, nodded. Yes, sir, and a potential fire hazard. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I assured them, gesturing vaguely behind me. I'm just, learning how to use my new smoker. Officer Miller blinked. Smoker? Yeah, I said, stepping aside. It's, pretty big. They exchanged a look, a flicker of bewildered amusement passing between them. Then, with a sigh, they stepped inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the acrid smell of burnt wood hit them. They both subtly winced. All right, Mr. Maxwell, Officer Miller said, trying to maintain his professional demeanor, though his eyes were now watering slightly. Let's see this. Smoker. I led them through my house, past a cowering Bartholomew, and into the backyard. The sight of the Apocalypse 2000, now a black, belching dragon, was truly something to behold. The smoke plume was a living entity, twisting and swirling upwards, temporarily blotting out the sun. Officer Davis pulled out her radio. Yeah, it's a code 8, she mumbled into it, looking at the smoker with a mixture of awe and disbelief. No, a barbecue, a really big barbecue. No, I don't think it's a public safety issue unless you count a crime against pork. She paused, listening to the crackle. No, I'm pretty sure it's not a secret government experiment, dispatcher. It's just a guy and his really big smoker. Officer Miller, meanwhile, was slowly circling the Apocalypse 2000, rubbing his chin. So, this is for cooking, you say? Yes, sir, I confirmed. Pork butt specifically. And the level of smoke, he continued, gesturing vaguely at the opaque atmosphere. Is that normal? I hesitated. For a beginner, apparently, yes. I might have overdone the wood a bit. A bit, Officer Davis muttered, coughing softly. My uniform smells like a campfire already. They pulled out their notepads, asking a series of questions. What kind of wood was I using? Was it properly seasoned? Did I have a fire extinguisher? Yes, I did, and I pointed to it proudly. They took down my name, address, and the precise measurements of the Apocalypse 2000, which felt strangely official, like I was registering a new weapon. Brenda, meanwhile, had ventured onto my lawn, clutching her tissue, looking like an outraged, smoke-infused statue. Officers! Can't you see this is an environmental hazard? He's polluting the entire neighborhood. It's a clear nuisance. Officer Miller turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. Ma'am, we're simply investigating the complaint. We have to follow procedure. But the smoke! She shrieked, fanning at her face. It's getting in my house! It's on my organic kale! The officers exchanged another look, this one containing a clear and present struggle to suppress laughter. Officer Miller cleared his throat again. Ma'am, we've reviewed the city ordinances on outdoor cooking and smoke abatement. As long as Mr. Maxwell is operating a legal cooking device and not causing an actual fire, there's not much we can do. It's not a crime to barbecue. But the smell, Brenda insisted, her voice rising to a furious pitch. Smell is subjective, ma'am, Officer Davis interjected, her voice perfectly polite. Unless it's proven to be a health hazard, which this is not, it falls into a gray area. Our advice to Mr. Maxwell would be to, maybe, learn how to use his equipment properly, and perhaps be a little more considerate. She sent me a pointed look. But we can't issue a citation for cooking. Defeated, but not entirely. Brenda sputtered, then huffed, then turned on her heel and marched back to her own house, presumably to call her lawyer, the mayor, and possibly the EPA. The officers finished their notes. All right, Mr. Maxwell, Officer Miller said, snapping his notepad shut. Just try to keep the smoke down a little. For everyone's sake. He couldn't quite meet my eyes, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, As they walked back to their patrol car, I heard Officer Davis say, "I'm telling you, Miller, I'm gonna smell like this for days. But damn, I kinda want some barbecue now." It was a victory, but a smoky, embarrassing one. My first attempt had been a disaster, an olfactory assault. But the law was on my side, and I had learned a crucial lesson. Sheer volume of smoke wasn't enough. I needed good smoke, delicious smoke, smoke that would make people drool, not call 911. My vengeance would need finesse, and a lot less burnt wood. The aftermath of Operation Smoke Bomb was humbling. My backyard still smelled vaguely of a distant wildfire, and the 3 pork butts I'd sacrificed were less low and slow and more high and hostile. They were charred on the outside, oddly raw on the inside, and tasted predominantly of ash. Even Bartholomew, after a cautious sniff, had turned his nose up. Brenda, despite her defeat at the hands of the law, still held the moral high ground in her own mind. She'd put up new signs in her yard: breathe clean air, and support local businesses, not backyard nuisances. It was clear that my amateur hour had only emboldened her. I needed to get serious. Spite alone, I realized, wouldn't make good BBQ. I needed a teacher. My search for a mentor began with a more practical approach than my previous Apocalypse 2,000 inches hunt. I scoured online reviews, local food blogs, and Facebook groups for the best BBQ in the Tri-County area. One name kept popping up: Smoky Joe's Rib Shack. The reviews were legendary, consistently mentioning fall-off-the-bone ribs, brisket like butter, and a general atmosphere of no-frills, all-flavor perfection. The photo showed a rundown, unassuming building with a perpetually overflowing parking lot. Perfect. The next day, armed with a healthy dose of humility, I drove to Smoky Joe's. The place was exactly as described: a greasy spoon, the air thick with the intoxicating scent of wood smoke and caramelized meat. Inside, the walls were adorned with faded photos of local sports teams, yellowed newspaper clippings, and various Best BBQ awards. The clientele were a mix of construction workers, office drones on lunch breaks, and serious-looking men with BBQ competition t-shirts. My ironic band t-shirt suddenly felt very out of place. Behind the counter, a mountain of a man with a beard that looked like it had absorbed a decade's worth of hickory smoke was carving a brisket with the practiced ease of a surgeon. This had to be Joe. His face was weathered, his eyes shrewd and perpetually squinting, as if perpetually peering through a haze of smoke. I ordered a pulled pork sandwich, mostly as an excuse to observe. It was, without hyperbole, the best pulled pork I had ever tasted. Each bite was a revelation: smoky, tender, juicy, perfectly seasoned. This man was a wizard. After finishing my sandwich, I took a deep breath and approached the counter again. Joe looked up, his expression unreadable. "Best pulled pork I've ever had, sir," I said, my voice probably a little too enthusiastic. Joe grunted, a sound that could have meant anything from thank you to get out of my sight. "That's why they call me Smoky Joe, kid, not Microwave Joe." I swallowed. This was going to be tough. I have a big smoker. An Apocalypse 2000, actually." Joe's eyebrows, bushy and gray, raised an inch. "Apocalypse 2000, huh? That's a serious piece of equipment. You running a catering business I don't know about?" "No," I admitted, lowering my voice. "It's for personal use. And, a neighbor." Joe paused, placing his carving knife down with a soft thunk. His eyes, surprisingly sharp, fixed on mine. "A neighbor, you say? What kind of neighbor requires an Apocalypse 2000? I spilled the whole story. The garlic chicken, Brenda's complaints, the HOA letter, the cookies. the steak, the public nuisance report, the police visit, and my disastrous first attempt at smoking. I left out no detail of my petty, smoke-fueled vendetta. As I spoke, a slow smile began to spread across Joe's face, starting as a flicker in his eyes and eventually crinkling the corners of his mouth. When I finished, he let out a booming laugh that filled the small restaurant. "So, you bought a cannon to kill a fly? And now you want me to teach you how to aim?" "Basically, yes," I confirmed, feeling a fresh wave of embarrassment but also a glimmer of hope. "But it's a really, really annoying fly." Joe leaned on the counter, wiping his hands on a pristine white towel. "Kid, I've seen a lot of things in my life. People who think they're pitmasters after one YouTube video. Folks who want to open a food truck with zero experience, but a man who buys a military-grade smoker just to stick it to his HOA? That, my friend, is a special kind of crazy. And I appreciate a good special kind of crazy." He shook his head, still chuckling. "I hate busybodies. Always have. There's a special place in hell for people who complain about the smell of good cooking. You got guts, kid. Or maybe just a screw loose." "Probably both," I offered, feeling a surge of relief. "All right," Joe said, his tone shifting. "Here's the deal. I don't usually take on apprentices, got no time. But this is too good to pass up. Consider it a public service. Teach a man to smoke, and he'll feed his community. Teach a man to smoke for petty revenge, and he'll change the world. One delicious, stinky brisket at a time." My face lit up. "So, you'll teach me?" "I'll teach you," he confirmed. "But don't think this is some walk in the park. BBQ ain't just slinging meat on a grate. It's an art. It's a science. It's a religion. And it starts with fire. Before you touch a piece of meat, you will become one with the flame. You'll learn wood, you'll learn smoke, you'll learn heat, and you'll learn patience. You show up here tomorrow, 5 a.m., and don't be late. I got no time for late." "I won't be late," I promised, a grin spreading across my face. I felt an exhilarating mix of terror and anticipation. My petty war against Brenda was about to get a serious upgrade. And I had found my general. "Good," Joe grunted. "Now get out of here. I got real customers to serve. And don't tell anyone I'm teaching you. Wouldn't want 'em thinking I'm going soft." He winked. I walked out of Smoky Joe's with a new bounce in my step. The smell of smoke no longer felt like a symbol of defeat, but a promise of victory. Brenda might have reported the smell of my cooking, but soon the entire neighborhood would be salivating at the aroma of my and Joe's expertise. The game, as they say, was officially on. The next morning, 4:30 a.m., my alarm blared, tearing me from a dream about a giant, smoke-breathing dragon made of pulled pork. I dragged myself out of bed, still half asleep, and fumbled for coffee. Smoky Joe had said 5 a.m., and I wasn't about to give him a reason to doubt my commitment. Smoky Joe's was a different beast at that hour. The air was cool, but the smokers in the back were already gently puffing, sending ribbons of sweet wood smoke into the pre-dawn darkness. Joe was there, apron on, a stern look on his face, stirring a pot of what smelled like a highly concentrated coffee and regret concoction. "You're late," he grunted, without looking up. "It's 4:55, I protested. "Exactly. 5 minutes you could have been learning about the spiritual connection between seasoned oak and perfect char. Get back here." He pointed to a stack of various wood logs. "First lesson. Wood. What do you see?" Thus began my BBQ boot camp. It was less Karate Kid and more Full Metal Jacket for aspiring pitmasters. Joe was a taskmaster. He had me sorting wood, explaining the difference between hickory, oak, cherry, and pecan, not just by sight, but by smell and even by sound when struck. "Each wood sings a different song, kid. You gotta listen to it. Understand its soul before you ask it to give up its smoke." My first weeks were spent entirely on fire management. No meat, just fire. Joe would have me light the Apocalypse 2000, then spend hours agonizing over the precise placement of logs, the opening and closing of vents, trying to maintain a perfectly steady temperature, hour after hour. He'd check the smoke, running his hand through it, sniffing it like a sommelier. "Too thick, that's creosote. You'll ruin the meat," he'd grumble. "Too thin, no flavor. You want that thin blue smoke, like a whisper. Gentle, persistent. That's the breath of the pit." I learned to read the smoke, to understand the subtle language of the firebox, the way the air flowed, the heat, radiated. I developed a sixth sense for temperature fluctuations, often knowing the smoker was too hot or too cold before I even looked at the gauge. My hands were perpetually stained with ash, my clothes smelled permanently of hickory, and I rarely slept more than 5 hours a night. But slowly, painstakingly, I started to get it. The Apocalypse. 2000, once a terrifying, mysterious beast, began to feel like an extension of myself. The turning point came about a month into my training. Joe had finally allowed me to smoke a rack of St. Louis ribs, a notoriously finicky cut. I'd prepped them meticulously, applied the rub with the reverence of a monk, and tended the smoker for 6 hours straight, never letting the temperature stray more than 5 degrees. When it was time to pull them, my hands were shaking. I brought a slab over to Joe. He picked one up, his face a mask of concentration. He bent it gently. The bend test. It yielded perfectly. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then closed his eyes, a blissful expression momentarily softening his gruff features. He opened his eyes and grunted. "Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. You might actually have a future beyond graphic design." It was the highest praise he could give, and I felt a thrill run through me that surpassed any client approval I'd ever received. I'd done it. I'd made good BBQ. As my skills improved, the smell wafting from my yard underwent a miraculous transformation. The acrid, choking smoke of my first attempt was replaced by a genuinely mouth-watering aroma. The sweet, savory, unmistakable scent of perfectly cooked pork. It drew people in. My first unofficial customer was Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly lady who lived next door and always offered me homemade cookies. She tentatively approached my fence one afternoon, inhaling deeply. "Leo, dear," she called out, "what is that wonderful smell? It's making my stomach rumble like a thunderstorm." I, flushed with my newfound success, offered her a small plate of pulled pork. Her eyes lit up. "Oh my word, this is heavenly. You truly have a gift." Word spread. Soon, other neighbors, drawn by the irresistible scent, started dropping by. "Hey, Leo, what's cooking today?" "That smells amazing, man," I started sharing. Small portions of brisket, a few ribs, pulled pork sandwiches. I couldn't resist. It was like a delicious, smoky counteroffensive. One of these new allies was Chloe, who lived across the street. She was a witty, sardonic marketing professional with bright pink streaks in her hair and a perpetually amused expression. She became my chief taste tester and confidant. "Okay, Leo," she'd say, taking a bite of a rib. "This is so good it makes me want to slap my mama, and my mama is a saint." She'd watch Brenda, who was now a perpetual fixture at her own window, scowling at the impromptu gatherings in my yard. She looks like she's watching a zombie apocalypse unfold, only the zombies are really friendly and carrying delicious meat. Brenda's breathe clean air signs, once a source of irritation, now just looked pitiful. The neighborhood was now firmly divided. On one side, Brenda, isolated and fuming. On the other, me, surrounded by a growing legion of hungry, happy neighbors, all united by the irresistible pull of good BBQ. My backyard, once the scene of a skirmish, was becoming a beacon of community, fueled by smoked meats. Brenda's power was waning. My smoke, once a nuisance, was now a neighborhood treasure. And it felt glorious. The neighborhood barbecues became a regular occurrence. Every weekend, my backyard transformed into an impromptu culinary gathering. Chloe was usually there, making sarcastic observations and occasionally attempting to brand my humble operation. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous potato salad. Even Bartholomew, having forgiven me for the tire fire incident, would circulate amongst the guests, hoping for a dropped morsel. Brenda, meanwhile, remained a silent, fuming sentinel at her window, occasionally closing her curtains with a dramatic flourish that only added to the neighborhood's amusement. My smoke, far from being a nuisance, was now a unifier. One Tuesday morning, after another grueling 5 a.m. session, Smoky Joe wiped his hands on his apron and looked at me, a rare glint of genuine pride in his eyes. "You're good, kid," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "You've got the feel for it now. You understand the heat, the smoke, the meat. You're making real barbecue." I beamed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the smoker. "Thanks, Joe. That means a lot." "But," he continued, a familiar sternness returning to his voice, "are you win a blue ribbon and get your picture in the local paper good? Because that's how you really stick it to her." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "The Tri-County Smoke-Off," he announced, his voice booming. "It's next month. Biggest local competition, serious pitmasters, serious judges, serious bragging rights, and a damn good cash prize. If you win that, Leo, she won't just be eating crow. She'll be eating crow that's been slow-smoked over hickory for 14 hours. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. I had started this whole thing out of spite, a petty act of revenge. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being about Brenda and started being about the meat, the fire, the craft. I'd genuinely fallen in love with smoking. The thought of competing against seasoned professionals filled me with a familiar beginner's dread. "I don't know, Joe," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "I'm still pretty new to this. Those guys have been doing this for decades." Joe fixed me with a stare that could melt steel. "Kid, you got the passion. You got the skill. You got the best damn teacher in 3 counties, if I do say so myself. And you got a motivation that'll make you cook with fire in your belly. You think those other fellas got a Brenda pushing them? I doubt it. That's your secret weapon." I thought about it. The long hours, the burnt fingers, the endless practice, the satisfaction of pulling a perfect brisket, the cheers of my neighbors, and the sheer, unadulterated pleasure of seeing Brenda's face slowly deflate with each delicious puff of smoke. Joe was right. This wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about solidifying my victory, making a statement that echoed far beyond my backyard. I called Chloe that night. "Joe wants me to enter the Tri-County Smoke-Off," I told her, my voice still laced with doubt. There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a shriek of pure delight. "Are you kidding me? Leo, that's amazing! You have to do it! This is the ultimate mic drop! Brenda will spontaneously combust!" Her enthusiasm was infectious. She talked me through it, reminding me of all the progress I'd made, all the praise I'd received. My other neighbors, when they heard, were equally supportive. Mrs. Henderson offered to make my lucky charm, a knitted pig wearing a tiny chef's hat. "All right," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "I'm in." "Yes!" Chloe shouted. "Okay, we need a team name. Something catchy. Something that screams delicious revenge." "Code 8 Culinary," I suggested, thinking back to Officer Davis's radio call. Chloe paused. "Oh, that's good. Subtle, but the people who know. Okay, team t-shirts, social media push, we're gonna make you a legend." And so, Code 8 Culinary was born. Smoky Joe, of course, was designated the official pit boss, his wisdom and experience invaluable. Chloe became our head of marketing and moral support, already brainstorming logos and hashtags. The neighbors became our official taste testing and cheering squad. It felt like a small, delicious army assembling for battle. Brenda naturally found out. Suburbia, for all its beige conformity, was a relentless rumor mill. She must have overheard Mrs. Henderson excitedly telling someone about our Leo entering the smoke-off. Or perhaps she simply saw Chloe in my yard, measuring my Apocalypse 2000 for a potential banner. Her response was swift and predictable. She launched a furious campaign on the neighborhood's private social media page, Maple Drive Community Watch. Brenda L., 2 houses down. Dear residents, it has come to my attention that a certain individual on Maple Drive is planning to commercialize his disruptive activities by entering a public barbecue competition. This raises serious concerns about increased traffic, noise, and yes, the ongoing issue of excessive permeating odors. Are we to allow our peaceful community to become a staging ground for such ventures? I urge you all to reconsider supporting this commercialization of a neighborhood nuisance. Property values are at stake. I braced myself for the backlash. But what happened next was a glorious testament to the power of good barbecue. Mrs. Henderson, next door. Nonsense, Brenda. Leo's cooking is a delight. He shares with everyone. And the smell is heavenly. We are all rooting for him. Go Code 8 Culinary. Mark T., 3 houses down. Commercialize? The guy shares free brisket with us every week. Best BBQ I've ever had. If he wins, I expect extra ribs, Leo. You got my vote. Chloe P., across the street. Brenda, disruptive activities include complaining about the smell of roasted chicken. Leo is a national treasure. Code 8 Culinary #smoke him if you got him. The comment section exploded. The entire neighborhood, almost without exception, rallied around me. They posted pictures of the delicious food I'd shared, recounted funny anecdotes about the Apocalypse 2000, and wished me luck. Brenda's attempt to paint me as a villain had backfired spectacularly. She was completely isolated, her outrage drowned out by a chorus of support and the collective anticipation of delicious, award-winning barbecue. She'd lost the room. She'd lost the street. She'd lost the entire damn zip code. I scrolled through the comments, a wide grin on my face. This wasn't just about a competition anymore. It was about community. It was about defying petty tyrants. And it was about proving that sometimes the most delicious revenge is served low and slow, with a generous side of smoke. The Tri-County Smoke-Off was going to be epic. The morning of the Tri-County Smoke-Off dawned crisp and clear, exactly the kind of perfect late summer day you dream of for a competition. My alarm blared at 3 a.m., but this time there was no dragging, just pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I met Joe and Chloe at the fairgrounds. The air was already thick with the scent of wood smoke, a beautiful complex symphony of hickory, pecan, and oak. Dozens of custom smokers, many even bigger than my Apocalypse 2000, lined the competition field. Teams of serious-looking pitmasters, some with grizzled beards and worn-out t-shirts, others with brand-new matching team gear, were already in motion, prepping their stations. The energy was electric, a mix of camaraderie and fierce competition. "All right, rookie," Joe grunted, clapping me on the shoulder. "Time to earn your stripes. Remember everything I taught you. Trust your instincts, and don't you dare overcook that brisket." Chloe, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of pink hair and nervous energy. She'd decorated our station with a hand-painted Code 8 Culinary banner, complete with a cartoon pig wearing a police hat. "Okay, Leo, deep breaths. Think of Brenda's face. That'll calm you down. Our first task was to get the Apocalypse 2000 up to temperature. I loaded the firebox with the seasoned hickory and oak Joe had selected, carefully built my fire, and watched the smoke begin to curl. This was it. No more practice, no more experiments. Just pure, unadulterated competition-level barbecue. The first few hours were a frantic blur. We were competing in 4 categories: chicken, ribs, pork shoulder, and brisket. Each had specific turn-in times, and missing one meant disqualification. The chicken went on first, followed by the ribs, then the massive pork shoulder, and finally the colossal brisket, the crown jewel of barbecue. Joe moved with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned pro, checking temperatures, advising on wood, offering subtle adjustments to the vents. "Your fire's running a little hot, kid. Damp that down," he'd say, or "Give that pork butt another spritz, it's drying out." His presence was a calming anchor amidst the swirling chaos. Chloe, meanwhile, was my other indispensable support. She timed everything, kept me hydrated, and periodically ran to other teams to scout the competition, reporting back with whispered intelligence like a spy. "Team Smokin' Aces is doing a pineapple glaze on their ribs, very bold," she'd report. "And Brisket Bosses just opened a new bottle of their secret rub. Smells like paprika and pure smugness." The other teams were a mix of friendly and fiercely competitive. We exchanged pleasantries, offered each other a spare glove or a helping hand with a heavy slab of meat. But underneath it all was the hum of rivalry. This was serious business. My neighbors started arriving mid-morning, a small but vocal cheering section. Mrs. Henderson waved her knitted pig. Mark from 3 houses down held up a sign that read, "Eat this, Brenda." It made me laugh, releasing some of the tension. And then, she appeared. Brenda. Not in her usual sensible cardigan, but in a slightly too tight pantsuit, clutching a clipboard and wearing a pair of dark sunglasses that did little to hide the triumphant glint in her eyes. She walked slowly through the competition area, pausing at each team's station, making notes on her clipboard as if she were a health inspector or a city official. She gave my station an especially long, disdainful stare. "Well, well, Leo," she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled accusation. "Engaging in commercial activities after all, I see. I'm just here to observe, of course, for community standards." I just smiled, a genuinely confident, smoke-infused smile. "Morning, Brenda. Glad you could make it. You might learn a thing or two about real cooking." She huffed, wrote something furiously on her clipboard, and then moved on, occasionally glancing back, her presence a low-grade hum of annoyance in the background. Her presence, ironically, only fueled my determination. The clock ticked relentlessly. Turn-in times were strict. Chicken, 12 p.m., ribs, 1:30 p.m., pork, 3 p.m., brisket, 4:30 p.m. Each category required a perfect box. Precisely arranged slices of meat, usually with a sprig of parsley for garnish, presented flawlessly to the judges. My hands were shaking as I sliced the chicken, ensuring each piece had perfect skin and juicy meat. Joe hovered, his eyes scanning every cut. "Even cuts, kid. Presentation matters. They eat with their eyes first." The ribs were next. I gently pulled them from the smoker, the meat almost falling off the bone. The smoke ring a beautiful, deep ruby red. I brushed them with a light glaze, creating a beautiful sheen. The pork shoulder, after 12 hours of slow cooking, shredded into tender, juicy strands with just a gentle tug. I piled it high, ensuring that beautiful bark. The dark, flavorful crust was visible. And then the brisket, the beast. I'd spent 14 hours tending this magnificent cut of beef. I pulled it from the smoker, let it rest for a crucial hour, then began to slice. Each slice was a perfect, glistening rectangle. The fat rendered to a delicate softness, the smoke ring clear and even, It was the culmination of weeks of training, of countless hours, of Joe's unwavering guidance. It was perfect. As the last turn-in box was carried to the judging tent, a wave of exhaustion, mixed with immense relief, washed over me. I looked at Joe, whose face was streaked with ash, but held a look of quiet satisfaction. "We did it, Joe," I said, my voice hoarse. "Now we wait, kid," he replied, giving me a rare, genuine smile. The hardest part. The award ceremony was held in the main pavilion at 6 p.m. The entire fairgrounds had gathered, a buzzing crowd of competitors, spectators, and hungry locals. My neighbors were there, front and center, holding their signs. Even Brenda was there, perched on the edge of the crowd, sunglasses still on, a look of grim expectation on her face. The announcer, a booming man in a checkered shirt, took the stage. "All right, folks, time to announce our winners for the Tri-County Smoke-Off." My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood next to Joe and Chloe, my hands clammy. This was it. All the work, all the smoke, all the petty revenge. It all came down to this moment. "First up, chicken," the announcer boomed. "Third place goes to Smokin' Aces. Second place, Grill Thrillers. And our first place winner for chicken, Big Pete's BBQ." I clapped, a little disappointed, but shrugged. Chicken wasn't our strongest category. "Next, ribs," he continued. "Third place, BBQ Bandits. Second place, Grill Thrillers again. And first place for ribs, Smokin' Aces." Still not us. My hope started to wane a little. Brenda, I could sense, was practically vibrating with schadenfreude. I risked a glance at her. Her lips were pursed, but there was a definite smugness in her posture. "Now for the pork shoulder category." The announcer paused dramatically. "Third place, the Smokehouse Crew. Second place, Grill Thrillers. And our first place winner for pork shoulder, Big Pete's BBQ." 3 categories down, and Code 8 Culinary hadn't been called. My shoulders slumped. All that work, all that anticipation. Maybe Joe was right. Maybe I just wasn't win a blue ribbon good. Maybe I was just a graphic designer who got a little too obsessed. Brenda's smug look had morphed into a full-blown smirk. She was probably already composing a passive-aggressive post for the HOA page. As predicted, some activities are best left to the professionals. "And finally," the announcer boomed, his voice reaching a crescendo, "the ultimate category, the Queen of Barbecue, brisket." My breath hitched. This was it, our best shot. Joe's unwavering confidence. My 14 hours of meticulous care. "Third place for brisket goes to Smokin' Aces." A round of applause. My stomach twisted. "Second place for brisket goes to the Smokehouse Crew." Another round of applause. My blood ran cold. This was it. Nothing. The defeat was crushing. I closed my eyes, bracing for the final announcement. The one that wouldn't be my name. I could practically feel Brenda's victorious gaze burning into me. "And our first place winner for brisket," the announcer paused, drawing out the suspense, "with a near-perfect score. Rookie team, Code 8 Culinary." A collective gasp, then an explosion of cheers. My neighbors erupted, shouting and clapping. Chloe shrieked, jumping up and down and throwing her arms around me. Joe clapped me on the back, a wide, genuine smile finally breaking through his gruff exterior. I stared, stunned, as they called my name. Me, Leo Maxwell, rookie pitmaster, brisket champion. I walked up to the stage in a daze, accepting the huge, shiny trophy, the oversized check, and a blue ribbon that felt heavier than gold. The crowd cheered, flashing photos. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then my eyes found Brenda. She was standing there, utterly, completely still. Her mouth was slightly open. Her sunglasses were still on, but I could feel the laser focus of her defeat. The smirk was gone. The smugness had evaporated. She looked utterly deflated, like a balloon suddenly punctured. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no gloating, just a quiet, final, magnificent triumph. She just turned slowly and began to walk away, shoulders slumped, a figure of utter, comprehensive defeat. I held up my trophy, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy washing over me. This wasn't just a trophy. It was a monument to passion, to community, and to the sweet, sweet taste of perfectly smoked, justified vengeance. The week after the Tri-County smoke-off was a whirlwind. My phone hadn't stopped ringing with congratulatory messages. The local paper ran a front-page story. Graphic designer smokes competition, wins brisket title. Complete with a slightly embarrassing photo of me holding the giant trophy, looking both ecstatic and shell-shocked. My Code 8 culinary banner was still hanging proudly in my backyard, now adorned with the blue ribbon. The biggest change, however, was the atmosphere on Maple Drive. The air, once thick with Brenda's disapproval, was now permeated by an almost reverent respect for my smoking prowess. Neighbors who had once been polite but distant now stopped to chat, asking for tips, or more often, if I was smoking anything this weekend. My backyard barbecues, once a defiant act, were now a celebration. I decided to host a victory BBQ, a final delicious exclamation point to the whole saga. The entire neighborhood was invited. The Apocalypse 2000, no longer a weapon of war, but a tool of community, puffed away gently, releasing the sweet, tantalizing scent of slow-cooked pulled pork into the evening air. Joe was there, holding court by the smoker, regaling everyone with tales of my early, disastrous attempts. Chloe was handing out Code 8 culinary stickers and T-shirts. Mrs. Henderson brought enough potato salad to feed a small army. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my now beloved backyard, there was a tentative knock on my front door. I looked through the peephole, and my heart gave a little jolt. It was Brenda. She wasn't wearing a pantsuit or clutching a clipboard. She was in a simple blouse and slacks. Her posture was still stiff, but the usual battle-ready tension seemed to have softened. In her hand, she held a small plastic Tupperware container. I opened the door. "Brenda," I said, a neutral tone masking my surprise. "Leo," she replied, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. She looked directly at me, and for the first time I saw something besides anger in her eyes. It looked a lot like grudging respect. I just wanted to say congratulations on your win." "Thank you," I said, genuinely surprised. She held out the Tupperware. "And I brought this, my grandmother's coleslaw recipe. It's quite good. It pairs well with pork." I took the container, my fingers brushing hers. The plastic was cool. It was a peace offering, her version of a white flag. She wasn't apologizing, not directly, but this was Brenda. This was as close as she was ever going to get. She was acknowledging my victory, not just in the competition, but in the battle for the neighborhood's collective palate. "Thank you, Brenda," I said, a small, genuine smile forming on my face. "That's really thoughtful." She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Well, enjoy your celebration." And with that, she turned and walked slowly back to her own house, disappearing behind her closed door. She didn't look back. I closed the door, holding the coleslaw container. I walked back into my backyard, a new sense of contentment settling over me. The air was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the glorious, comforting scent of barbecue. My neighbors were gathered, enjoying the food, the company, and the peaceful, smoky atmosphere. I looked at my trophy, gleaming on the table, a testament to a journey I never expected to take. I had started this whole thing out of spite, a ridiculous, over-the-top reaction to a petty complaint. But somewhere along the way, it had transformed. I'd found a passion, learned a skill, and unexpectedly, built a community. I had turned a nuisance into a neighborhood institution, a complaint into a culinary triumph. I took a bite of my perfectly smoked pulled pork, then a forkful of Brenda's coleslaw. It was actually quite good, tangy, creamy, a perfect counterpoint to the rich, smoky meat. I thought about Brenda, alone in her house, perhaps eating her own gluten-free, dairy-free dinner, probably still grumbling. But she'd brought coleslaw, and that, in its own way, was a victory as sweet as any blue ribbon. "You know what?" I said aloud, to no one in particular, but loud enough for Chloe to hear. "I should send her a thank you card." Chloe just laughed, clinking her glass against mine. "To the god of smoke," she said, "and to the best damn revenge a suburbanite ever cooked up." I raised my glass, a wide, contented grin on my face. The smoke from the Apocalypse 2000 curled lazily into the twilight sky, carrying with it the delicious scent of triumph. My life, once beige and predictable, was now gloriously, deliciously, and permanently infused with smoke. And I wouldn't have it any other way.